Hello, friends. If you want to watch super hit movie El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called El Camino. A Breaking Bad movie will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie also. We will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office, collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film apart. From this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. Let's start the video. El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, or simply El Camino, is a 2019 American neo-Western crime thriller film. Part of the Breaking Bad franchise, it serves as a sequel and epilogue to the television series Breaking Bad. It continues the story of Jesse Pinkman, who partnered with former teacher Walter White throughout the series to build a crystal meth empire based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Series creator Vince Gilligan wrote, directed, and produced El Camino. Aaron Paul reprised his role as Jesse Pinkman. Several Breaking Bad actors also reprised their roles, including Jesse Plemons, Krysten Ritter, Charles Baker, Matt Jones, Robert Forster, Jonathan Banks, and Bryan Cranston. Forster died on the day of the film's release, making it one of his final on-screen appearances. Gilligan began considering the story of El Camino while writing Breaking Bad's series finale. He approached Paul with the idea for the film in 2017, near the 10th anniversary of the show's premiere, and completed the script several months later. Principal photography began in secret in New Mexico in November 2018, lasting nearly 50 days. The project remained unconfirmed until Netflix released a trailer on August 24, 2019. El Camino received a digital release on Netflix and a limited theatrical run on October 11, 2019, with an AMC television premiere on February 16, 2020. It drew positive reviews from critics and garnered several award nominations, winning Best Movie Made for Television at the Critics' Choice Television Awards and Best Motion Picture Made for Television at the Satellite Awards. El Camino additionally gained 4 nominations at the Primetime Creative Arts Emmy Awards for Outstanding Television Movie and other technical categories. Plot. In a flashback to shortly before they leave Walter White's meth business, Jesse Pinkman asks Mike Ehrmantraut where he would go to start over. Mike says if he were younger, he would go to Alaska, which Jesse finds appealing. Jesse expresses the desire to make amends for past wrongdoing, but Mike cautions that starting over would make that impossible. In the present, Jesse flees the Brotherhood compound in Todd Alquist's El Camino. He goes to the Albuquerque home of Skinny Pete and Badger, who hide the car and give Jesse a place to sleep. The next morning, Jesse calls Old Joe to dispose of the El Camino, but Joe leaves after discovering its LoJack. Pete devises a plan to make it appear Jesse fled after trading the El Camino for Pete's Ford Thunderbird. Pete and Badger give Jesse the money Walter gave them, and Badger drives south in the Thunderbird, so it appears Jesse is headed to Mexico. Pete stays with the El Camino and waits for the police to respond to the LoJack. Jesse departs in Badger's Pontiac Fiero. He learns from the radio news of Walter's fatal poisoning of a woman and of Walter's death. In a flashback to Jesse's captivity, Todd takes Jesse to Todd's apartment to help dispose of his cleaning lady, whom he killed after she discovered his hidden money. They sidestep Lou Schanzer, Todd's busybody neighbor, and bury the corpse in the painted desert. Jesse briefly holds the pistol Todd left unsecured, but Todd talks him into returning it. In the present, Jesse sneaks into Todd's apartment and searches for Todd's money. He finds the new hiding place, but policemen Neil Candy and Casey enter and begin searching. Jesse hides but holds Casey at gunpoint after Casey finds him. Neil disarms Jesse, who realizes they are not police but thugs also looking for Todd's money. To save himself, Jesse reveals he found the cash. Lou reports finding an old note from Todd and Casey distracts him by feigning interest. Neil and Jesse bargain over the cash, and Neil lets Jesse take a third. As they depart, Jesse recognizes Neil as the welder who built the tether that held him while he was forced to cook meth for the Brotherhood. Jesse finds Ed Galbraith, the disappearer, who wants $125,000 to aid Jesse, plus $125,000 for the previous occasion when Jesse hired him but failed to commit. Jesse is $800 short, and Ed refuses to help. Knowing they are being surveilled, Jesse calls his parents and feigns willingness to surrender. After his parents and the police depart, Jesse sneaks into the Pinkman home and takes 2 pistols from his father's safe, a Colt Woodsman, and an Ivor Johnson hammerless. Jesse drives to Neil's shop, where Neil, Casey, and 3 friends celebrate with escorts and cocaine. After the escorts leave, he asks for $1,800, and Neil refuses. Seeing the Woodsman in Jesse's waistband, Neil challenges him to a duel for his share of the cash. Jesse agrees, and when Neil reaches for his gun, Jesse shoots him with the hammerless, which was concealed in his jacket pocket. Casey fires at Jesse, but Jesse kills him with Neil's gun. Jesse collects the driver's licenses of the remaining men and lets them leave after threatening to return and kill them if they tell the police. He recovers Neil's cash and departs after setting an explosion to cover his tracks. In a flashback, Walter and Jesse have breakfast after a multi-day meth cook. Estimating they will make more than $1 million, Walter laments having waited his entire life to do something special and calls Jesse lucky since he will not have to wait. In the present, Ed drops Jesse off at a car park near Haines, Alaska. Jesse gives Ed a letter for Brock Cantillo and acknowledges he does not want to say goodbye to anyone else. Driving off, Jesse has a flashback to his time with Jane Margolis. He tells her he admires what she said about going wherever the universe takes her, but she dismisses it as metaphorical and encourages him to make his own decisions. Jesse drives on, smiling at the prospect of a new life.
Cast:
Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman, a former meth cook who once partnered with Walter White. Jesse Plemons as Todd Alquist, one of Jesse's captors, and a member of the neo-Nazi gang that forces Jesse to cook meth, who appears in flashbacks before his death. Krysten Ritter as Jane Margolis, Jesse's deceased girlfriend, who appears in a flashback. Charles Baker as Skinny Pete, Jesse's friend. Matt Jones as Brandon Badger Mayhew, Jesse's friend. Robert Forster as Ed Galbraith, a vacuum cleaner store owner who relocates people and gives them new identities. Jonathan Banks as Mike Ehrmantraut, former business partner of Jesse and Walter, who appears in a flashback. Bryan Cranston as Walter White, meth kingpin, and Jesse's deceased former partner and high school chemistry teacher, who appears in a flashback. Scott Shepard as Casey, Neil's associate. Scott MacArthur as Neil Candy, a welder involved in Jesse's captivity. Tom Bauer as Lou Schanzer, Todd's nosy neighbor. Kevin Rankin as Kenny, one of Jesse's captors. Larry Hankin as Old Joe, the owner of a local junkyard who previously helped Jesse and Walter with several activities connected to their meth business. Tess Harper as Diane Pinkman, Jesse's mother, who has a strained relationship with her son. Michael Bofshiver as Adam Pinkman, Jesse's father, who has a strained relationship with his son. Marla Gibbs as Jean, an Albuquerque resident seen shopping at Best Quality Vacuum. Brendan Sexton III as Kyle, an employee at Candy Welding Co. Johnny Ortiz as Buzzboy, who appears in a flashback serving Jesse and Walter's table at Owl Cafe. Todd Terry as Austin Ramey, special agent in charge of the El Paso division of the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. Julie Pearl as Suzanne Erickson, assistant district attorney of Bernalillo County. David Matty as Clarence Man Mountain, who appears dropping off the women at Candy Welding Co. Themes and style. While El Camino's plot focuses on Jesse Pinkman escaping to Alaska, writer and director Vince Gilligan stated that thematically, the film centers on Jesse's transformation from a boy to a man. As Jesse spent the entirety of Breaking Bad as Walter White's partner, El Camino, in contrast, shows Jesse coming to terms with his past and making his own decisions, free of White's influence. This theme is prevalent in the flashbacks that bookend El Camino, with Mike Ehrmantraut at the beginning and Walter White and Jane Margolis at the end. Alan Sepinwall of Rolling Stone detailed that while these scenes serve as a reminder of who Jesse used to be and all that he lost, all three flashbacks are also about the way that Jesse has been forced by tragic circumstance to grow up and think more about his place in the universe and the impact he has on others. And they're about setting him on the road where Ed Braith leaves him at the film's conclusion. Aaron Paul described his character Jesse as someone who went through hell and back multiple times and is still paying for those sins. But Donna Bowman of the AV Club remarked that in freeing his ambitions from Walter White's manipulations, Jesse found his own redemption and avoided his mentor's fate, finally giving himself a chance for a future. The opening flashback with Jesse and Mike also sets the theme of Jesse wanting to start over while also making things right with his past. Though Mike warned that starting over would make it impossible to make amends, Sepinwall noted that Jesse was able to repay several emotional debts from the series with rectifying gestures throughout the film. Giving a proper goodbye to his friends Badger and Skinny Pete, apologizing to his parents one last time, getting revenge against Neil Candy and Casey, paying back his literal debt to Ed Galbraith, and sending his farewell letter of apology to Brock Cantillo. Placing his own analysis on Jesse's final duel with Neil, Gilligan interpreted the scene as more than just Jesse getting the cash he needed for his escape, but also as a way of exorcising demons that plagued him from the events of the series. Both Gilligan and Paul speculated that Jesse would still be haunted by these demons, even in his new life in Alaska, but had at least achieved some form of vengeance for his past by ridding the world of an evil person. Breaking Bad was often categorized as a contemporary Western. This theme is also present in El Camino. Gilligan expressed his admiration for director Sergio Leone and his love for the Western genre. He originally wanted to film Breaking Bad in the CinemaScope format. Leone used for the Dollars trilogy and got his wish in El Camino. Critics noted the duel between Jesse and Neil as being directly in the style of Western films. Gilligan referenced the good, the bad, and the ugly in other classic gunfights to sequence the scene with comparable camera coverage techniques. Likewise, composer Dave Porter used Western elements in the scene's score. Ben Travers of IndieWire traced the film's Western influences to its sweeping landscapes, Lone Survivor, and Final Standoff, while Matt Zoller cites a Vulture called El Camino's title unabashedly Western-tinged, and cited the final shot's lack of overt sentimentality as being true to the spirit of classic Westerns. Production.
Conception.
Vince Gilligan, the creator and showrunner of Breaking Bad, had the idea for El Camino while writing the series finale, Felina. He asked himself what happened to Jesse Pinkman after the events of the episode when Jesse escaped from the neo-Nazis' compound after being rescued by Walter White. Though he kept Jesse's fate ambiguous in the finale's script, Gilligan offered two possibilities during interviews, a more realistic one where the police caught Jesse a few miles from the compound, and a second, more optimistic one where he got away but still had to cope with the terrible things he witnessed throughout the series. In the intervening years, Gilligan toyed with both approaches. One early idea involved Jesse hiding close to the Canadian border, getting lured back into crime to help a young woman in the town. This version ended with Jesse in a jail cell in the concluding scene, imprisoned yet at peace for the first time. Gilligan's girlfriend Holly Rice advised against this ending, saying fans would not appreciate seeing Jesse incarcerated after all he had been through. He received the same feedback when separately pitching ideas for the film with the writing staff of Better Call Saul, a Breaking Bad spin-off also created by Gilligan that still aired at the time. The staff featured many writers from the original series. Gilligan originally served as co-showrunner during the early seasons before leaving the writers' room to focus on other projects. They also objected to this ending because they planned on using a similar idea for the series finale of Better Call Saul, which was still to come many years later, and felt this conclusion fit their story better than Jesse's. After the negative reception to the concept of Jesse getting caught by authorities, Gilligan subsequently went with the storyline of Jesse escaping to Alaska. Development. The original idea for continuing Jesse Pinkman's story began as a short film or mini-episode of about 15 to 20 minutes in length. Realizing a short would not be cost-effective, Gilligan opted to make a full-length feature film. He initially thought about titling the project 63, referring to its unofficial status as the 63rd episode of Breaking Bad. However, during the meeting where Gilligan pitched story ideas with the Better Call Saul staff, series executive producer Thomas Schnauz advised him to change this proposed title. Schnauz, who served as an executive producer and a writer on both television series, reasoned to Gilligan that Breaking Bad essentially focused on Walter White's story, whereas the film and its title should be unique to reflect that they centered on Jesse Pinkman. Gilligan agreed and eventually settled on the title El Camino, referring to the car Jesse drives away with in Felina. Near the 10th anniversary of Breaking Bad's premiere, Gilligan started sharing the idea with former cast and crew members as a means to celebrate the milestone. Aaron Paul, who portrayed Jesse in the series, affirmed that around this time he received a phone call from Gilligan, who hinted at a return for his character. Paul initially believed this meant a cameo on Better Call Saul, which was a prequel to Breaking Bad. Gilligan then revealed his intentions to continue Jesse's story after the events of the series, much to Paul's excitement. Though he thought Breaking Bad concluded satisfyingly, Paul still felt attached to the character of Jesse Pinkman. Fans regularly asked him of Jesse's whereabouts, while he occasionally wondered about Jesse's fate himself. At the end of the conversation, Paul showed eagerness to be involved with any idea Gilligan had for a Breaking Bad continuation. Gilligan presented Paul with a completed screenplay 7 months after proposing his idea. Paul spent 3 hours in Gilligan's office going over the script and almost instantly felt able to pick up on Jesse's mindset and emotional beats. Following his initial read-through, Paul was so impressed that he felt speechless and likened this reaction to the one after his first reading of Felina. Once he was finished with the screenplay, Paul continued to express happiness and excitement for the film, which he called a love letter to Jesse and Breaking Bad's fans, and lauded Gilligan for approaching the script with caution and care. Though Gilligan had been involved with feature-length films before, El Camino would be the first he directed and produced. While he considered the concept of a sequel film for an extended period after Breaking Bad's conclusion, Gilligan stated he likely would not have been able to make it had Better Call Saul been unsuccessful. When Gilligan made his initial film pitch to Sony Pictures Television, the studio behind both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, the executives in the room quickly agreed to come on board. With his script in hand, Gilligan then selectively shopped the film to a few potential distributors, settling on Netflix and AMC due to their history with the show. Gilligan intended for El Camino to have a theatrical release, which Netflix previously provided for some of Breaking Bad's season premieres. El Camino's unspecified budget surpassed the $6 million budget per episode by the end of the show's final season. Writing. Unlike most of his work from The X-Files, Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul, where he collaborated with a writer's room to develop his scripts and meet his deadlines, Gilligan wrote the film's screenplay alone until he felt it was ready to present. Regarding El Camino as a coda to Breaking Bad, Gilligan believed the film would primarily appeal to fans and would not be as enjoyable to those who had not watched the series. This influenced his decision to write it as a direct continuation rather than inserting exposition scenes to try to attract new viewers. He felt El Camino could be seen independently from both Breaking Bad and its spin-off Better Call Saul, similarly to how the two series could be seen independently from one another. However, he also believed the three works existed together in a larger framework, and that viewers needed to watch all of them together to receive the full experience. When thinking of which Breaking Bad characters to use for El Camino, Gilligan considered bringing back Skyler White, Walter Jr., Hank and Marie Schrader, and Gus Fring, but could not find a way to incorporate them into Jesse's story. Saul Goodman was also considered, but Gilligan desisted as he was unaware of the potential plans Peter Gould and the Better Call Saul writers could have for the character in that series. An early concept included bringing back Uncle Jack as a ghost that goaded Jesse throughout his journey, but Gilligan discarded this idea as too dreary as he felt Jesse already suffered enough torment. Of the characters he ended up using, Gilligan felt most excited to bring back the sociopathic Todd Alquist, as he maintained fascination with the character and wished he could have been further explored on the series. Jesse Plemons, who portrayed Todd, expressed surprise at his deceased character's sizable role upon first reading the script, and described his portion of the film as Todd, free from supervision of his elders, having his best day. He also likened his scenes with Jesse to a dark buddy comedy. With Todd and the rest of the neo-Nazi gang canonically dead at the end of Felina, Gilligan felt the film needed a new villain to introduce conflict for Jesse in the present storyline. For this reason, Gilligan created the character Neil Candy, the welder who Gilligan labeled Nazi-adjacent due to his prior business dealings with the gang. He also described Neil as being more sociopathic than Todd, saying it would take someone of Neil's caliber to create the dog run that physically tethered Jesse without asking too many questions or even caring about Jesse's condition. Gilligan worried about introducing a new character not seen in Breaking Bad, but also called it Drama 101 to include Neil, as he gave Jesse a villain he could prevail against and provided the film with more visceral flair. Gilligan would keep the Better Call Saul writers' room involved throughout El Camino's production, including during the writing process. This was to not only ensure the two projects' continuity did not interfere with one another, but to also take in suggestions to improve his screenplay. Upon completion of his first draft, Gilligan immediately sought the advice of Gould, who developed Better Call Saul with Gilligan and became its sole showrunner after Gilligan reduced his own role in the series. The decision to bring Jane Margolis into the story resulted from this consultation, as the initial script did not include the character. After Gould read the first draft, he advised that Jane could appear in the ending, where it would mean the most to the audience. Gilligan thought about the suggestion for a couple of weeks and eventually agreed. He incorporated the idea into his script, and Jane ultimately delivered the final lines of El Camino. Krysten Ritter, who reprised the role in the film, called the ending with her character so beautiful as it sent Jesse off into the sunset. One of the biggest elements removed in later drafts was the very first thing Gilligan wrote for the script, the contents of Jesse's letter to Brock. Gilligan planned on having it read in voiceover while Jesse drove through Alaska in the final scene. Paul described it as the most honest, beautiful, caring letter imaginable, really just pouring his heart out and saying he's sorry. While the Better Call Saul staff praised the letter's contents, Gould and several others felt it would be better left to the audience's imagination to determine what Jesse wrote. Gilligan subsequently decided not to use the letter to conclude Jesse's story, and the voiceover would never end up being recorded. Paul agreed with Gilligan's decision, but mentioned he felt crushed it did not appear in the final cut. He retained possession of the letter after filming finished and shared his hopes that the letter's contents will eventually be revealed to the public. Gilligan wrote the scene of Walter and Jesse sitting in the diner in a light-hearted tone, with the intention of providing one last chance to see the two characters together as a final treat for the fans. Producer Melissa Bernstein suggested adding a bit more poignancy to the scene to let it resonate further with the audience. Gilligan left most of the scene from the original script intact, but he and Bernstein came up with the line, "You're really lucky, you know that you didn't have to wait your whole life to do something special," tying the scene to El Camino's theme of Jesse finally taking control of his life. Filming. Under the working title Greenbrier, a majority of the filming occurred in Albuquerque, New Mexico, from November 2018 to February 2019, with the overall shoot lasting 50 days. El Camino had a more relaxed shooting pace than Breaking Bad, with only 1.5 to 3 pages of script filmed per day, as opposed to 6 to 8 to film. This less pressured schedule gave the actors more opportunities to improvise on set while providing the crew members additional time to film a wider variety of shots and further camera coverage. Gilligan felt the slower pace allowed him to reflect and feel a greater sense of finality for his creation whilst filming. The first footage filmed for El Camino was the shot where Jesse collapses into bed after showing up at Badger and Skinny Pete's house. Despite not portraying their characters since the show's ending several years prior, cast members felt at ease reprising their former roles. Paul filmed his scenes without any rehearsals, as he felt he could easily access Jesse's emotions the same way he could on the series. He likened his reprisal as Jesse to zipping on an old friend. El Camino also used many of the crew members who held their roles since the pilot of Breaking Bad, as several carried over to Better Call Saul when the show concluded. Paul would compare his first day of shooting with Gilligan, Matt Jones, Charles Baker, and the show's former crew members to a family reunion. During principal photography, production nearly decided to forego filming the shot of Jesse picking up a beetle outside of Neil Candy's office, citing scheduling constraints. Paul remained adamant in capturing the moment, citing it as a key insight into Jesse's frame of mind. The crew relented and filmed the scene in one take. Cinematography. El Camino used a 2.39:1 widescreen aspect ratio on the Arri Alexa 65 camera to capture the work in a cinematic manner. Gilligan and cinematographer Marshall Adams specifically chose the Alexa 65 for its quality in low-light filming, which the film heavily featured. Using this camera also meant El Camino would be shot digitally, as opposed to Breaking Bad, which shot on 35mm film stock. Production designer Judy Reed noted that Gilligan took advantage of his lens and wider aspect ratio to create a more visually luxurious experience than the series, letting the wide vista shots help meet El Camino's plot beats rather than employing more economic options commonly used for television. Adams agreed with this opinion, citing as an example the vast and empty space of the painted desert, underscoring Jesse's lonely and hopeless state in Todd's captivity. Gilligan wanted El Camino's cinematography to maintain the naturalistic look used on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, while also expanding it. Adams specified this as the realistic, practical-driven looks for night exteriors and low-light interiors that embraced all the colors and looks of Albuquerque that he used on Better Call Saul. By combining the Alexa 65 with Arri Prime DNA lenses, Adams could capture low light efficiently, control depth of field, and also maintain color contrast and balance. Adams graded El Camino's color palette with DaVinci Resolve. He did not let Breaking Bad dictate which colors he used and opted to make a palette specific to the film. To help receive dailies, production used Photochem, who did the same work on both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. The crew delivered footage with requested color changes to on-site Photochem members, who then applied the changes to get the dailies out fairly quickly for Adams's review. Adams saw El Camino as a way to pay homage to original Breaking Bad cinematographer Michael Slovis. Though Adams took over as director of photography during the third season of Better Call Saul, he previously filmed pickups with Slovis during the end of Breaking Bad's fourth season and served as cinematographer during the show's fifth season premiere. For El Camino, Adams took great lengths to match Slovis' lensing from the series while modifying it for the film's digital format and larger aspect ratio. He specified the opening of Jesse driving out of the compound as one scene he updated using this approach, likening it to a direct cut from Jesse's last appearance in Breaking Bad's finale. Adams applied the same principle for other scenes which used locations from the series, such as the compound and the vacuum store. To distinguish the flashback scenes from the ones set in the present, Gilligan decided against using different color saturation. He instead chose to have flashbacks filmed in a handheld look while having the present-day scenes more anchored and locked down. The fact that much of Breaking Bad used handheld filming inspired this decision. With the Alexa 65 camera too large to carry while filming, Gilligan achieved the wiggling effect by placing the camera on top of a truck airbag, which could be inflated and deflated easily between two plastic plates. Set design. Filming primarily occurred at Albuquerque Studios, where both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul were shot, along with other locations throughout the city. Wireless microphones would be planted throughout the sets and on the actors to record natural ambient noise and dialogue while shooting, as Gilligan preferred using organic sounds over applying ADR during post-production. Notable new sets built in the studio included Todd's apartment and the welding shop where Jesse's final confrontation with Neil Candy and Casey took place. For the first, Rhee, who worked as the production designer on Better Call Saul's fourth season, arranged the set to reflect the duality of Todd's character. The initial living room seemed sunny, meticulous, and clean, reflective of Todd's exterior Boy Scout personality, and appeared decorated with a childlike Easter egg palette to give a sense of his arrested development. However, the set's palette became darker going further into his bedroom, indicative of Todd's sociopathic tendencies. Plemons likened the apartment set to looking inside Todd's brain, describing absolute chaos beneath the apparent order on the surface. Rhee also designed the dimensions of the apartment set to fit El Camino's aspect ratio when shooting overhead. In doing this, Gilligan could create the shot of Jesse searching for Todd's money in several different rooms simultaneously. For the welding shop, Rhee wanted to maintain the accuracy of how a welding business appeared and match its exterior location, but also designed the set for the scene's stunt choreography and necessary camera blocking. Rhee incorporated the glass office in the back of the set to include breakage during the climax and enhance the scene's action beats. Several Breaking Bad locations were reused for El Camino, such as the Pinkman residence, the strip mall that contained Saul Goodman's office, and Ed Galbraith's vacuum repair shop. The original vacuum store had sold and become a furniture store since the series ended, so production had to recreate the set from scratch and use a special buyer to locate identical props from flea markets and salvage areas. Having a restored vacuum repair store set provided an added convenience for the fifth season premiere of Better Call Saul, which aired several months later. Initially, the episode included Ed Galbraith simply as a voiceover, as the episode's budget could not cover the cost of flying actor Robert Forster to Albuquerque and rebuilding the vacuum shop set. However, Bernstein recognized that both Forster and the rebuilt set would be available as part of El Camino. She then arranged for Gilligan to shoot the Better Call Saul scene with Forster in person during the film's production, months before filming began for any other episodes. One major Breaking Bad location that had to be rebuilt primarily on stage was the compound that held Jesse prisoner, as many of the original structures had been torn down. The new set recreated the interior of Jesse's cage for the initial scenes of Jesse in captivity and seeing Todd through the steel grate. Filming for the subsequent exterior sequence of Todd letting Jesse out of his confinement happened on location. Production found an existing Quonset hut in downtown Albuquerque and built a slightly smaller scale cage next to it in order to match the original site from the series. For the rebuilt compound laboratory, the set reused a majority of the original props, notably the cooking vessel Walter White, touched shortly before he died in Breaking Bad's final scene. Despite resulting in a continuity error, Gilligan said he did not have the heart to clean Walt's bloody handprint from the prop and instead left it in as an intentional Easter egg for fans. Exterior locations. El Camino was held in great secrecy from the pre-production stages. Certain cast members were approached for the film without knowing it was for a Breaking Bad continuation, and some kept that fact secret from their families when production began. The producers were very protective of the script during this period. Cast and crew members needed to be physically present in front of them in order to read the one copy that was kept under lock and key. Only near the start of shooting did rumors float that a Breaking Bad film began development, with Paul returning as Jesse. Bryan Cranston, who starred as Walter White on the series, confirmed the project in an interview, but said he had not seen a script, although he showed interest in participating if Gilligan called for it. Cranston would ultimately end up appearing in El Camino, having flown to Albuquerque in a private jet to shoot his scenes within the span of 36 hours. At the time, he starred in the Broadway production Network, a role for which he eventually won the Tony Award for Best Leading Actor, but used a 2-day break in January for filming As Krysten had grown his hair out since the series ended, the makeup team used a bald cap and fake mustache to help him achieve the appearance of Walter White, with additional visual effects added during post-production to perfect his look. Filming for the diner scene occurred first, with the set containing only crew members and their families serving as extras in order to keep the shoot confidential. Despite the enclosed filming location, numerous locals spotted the show's iconic RV in the parking lot of the diner, but the crew used the excuse that they were shooting a commercial for a Breaking Bad tour to deflect attention. Krysten shot the hallway scene the next day, then immediately returned to the airport, arriving in New York in time to perform that same evening. To prevent paparazzi photos, Krysten heavily disguised himself when escorted from and throughout the set. When filming completed for the day, Krysten and Paul were told to avoid seeing each other. Similar measures were taken to ensure that news of filming did not reach the locals, with cast and crew under tight restrictions about what they could say about the project. Cast members wore large cloaks to disguise their identities when heading to the set or when shooting outside in public places, and each of their characters were given code names. When off the set, the cast could not see one another, and when recognized, they would lie that they were working on the film. By the time the media began making a connection between Greenbrier and Breaking Bad, filming had mostly been completed. After news broke that the film would be a Breaking Bad sequel, representatives for AMC, Netflix, and Sony Pictures TV all declined to comment regarding the project's existence. Paul remained coy about its status, claiming in an interview that he had not heard anything regarding a Breaking Bad movie, even though filming had wrapped a month earlier. Filming of Better Call Saul's fifth season took place shortly after El Camino finished shooting to take advantage of the assembled crew. As such, cast members of Better Call Saul became aware of the film but swore to secrecy on the project. Days before El Camino's announcement, Bob Odenkirk, who starred as Saul Goodman on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, teased that the film was already completed and that the producers had done an amazing job of keeping it a secret. Editing. The elongated production schedule provided more time for editor Skip McDonald to work on El Camino's individual scenes and build the film's overall flow. McDonald, who also served as editor on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, would describe maintaining rhythm and pacing without the use of commercial breaks as one of the biggest differences between his work on the film and the two television series. He also felt that Gilligan receiving more leeway during filming resulted in more interesting pieces and design shots during the editing process. Gilligan waited until filming completed before entering the cutting room to give feedback. His initial viewing of McDonald's rough cut was his first time seeing any production footage edited together. El Camino's rough cut had an original runtime of 3 hours, with an estimated 30% of footage left out of the finished film. McDonald mentioned the necessity of excising scenes to sustain audience interest while also preventing the film from overextending its runtime. One story development removed during post-production involved Jesse getting shot in the side during his final showdown with Neil and Casey. This would have been followed by Ed Galbraith finding a wounded Jesse at the vacuum store the following morning, the latter subsequently opening his car's trunk to reveal the cash he acquired to fulfill his end of the bargain. While Paul asked to keep this sequence in the final cut, Gilligan felt it provided little payoff for the viewers and chose to remove it to let the film reach its conclusion quicker. Other scenes shortened for runtime included Jesse further relaxing in his hotel room before meeting with Walter White and an extended sequence of Jesse and Jane during their road trip. Gilligan confirmed the deleted and extended scenes would be available as bonus features for El Camino's home video release. Music. Score to arrange El Camino's score, production retained the use of composer Dave Porter, who created all of the original music for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Arriving later into the production process, Porter estimated spending 6 to 8 weeks composing the score, a much longer timetable compared to the 3 to 4 days per episode for the two series. Given the lengthier production schedule, Gilligan appeared more frequently in the studio to listen to Porter's score and exchange ideas, something he had never done during Breaking Bad. Porter, in turn, felt he had more resources to add nuance to El Camino's music and worked with Gilligan to achieve a cinematic sound which could also establish its own identity. Porter approached the film sequentially when composing the score, a method he described as unique to his usual process. He arranged the music in the beginning of the film to resemble that of an episode of Breaking Bad before gradually sounding unique to Jesse Geftery. Similar to his work on both series, his score used a mix of electronic sounds and live instrumentation. When noting the biggest differences between scoring Breaking Bad and El Camino, Porter mentioned that while the series shifted between multiple interwoven storylines, the film focused on a singular arc, the trials of Jesse, who he considered the moral thread of the series. This more linear storytelling presented Porter the opportunity to further explore Jesse's state of mind and experiment with his sound. He described El Camino's contents and resulting score as more cerebral and psychological, rather than relying on fast-paced adrenaline. When preparing his score, Porter re-watched the series in order to select musical cues he could revisit for El Camino. Many of the returning characters and locations received updated themes. Porter cited the scenes with Ed Galbraith and the compound as examples. However, to differentiate the flashback scenes from the scenes set in the present, Porter tried to replicate the less cinematic sounds from the original series as closely as possible. He described his main goal in designing the film's sound as wanting to link back to the score used in the series, but in a manner that it would not feel jarring or out of place. For this reason, Porter chose not to make any musical references to the original Breaking Bad theme song. He felt it represented Walter White's journey and did not fit in a story primarily about Jesse. Mondo issued an official soundtrack on October 14, 2020, nearly a full year after the film's release. The 26-track double LP featured Porter's score and many of El Camino's licensed tracks. Licensed tracks were used sparingly in El Camino, 98. Two prominent in the final cut included Sharing the Night Together by Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show, which Todd sings in the car during his and Jesse's road trip, and Static on the Radio by Jim White, which ran over the end credits. Other licensed tracks include I'd Really Love to See You Tonight by England Dan and John Ford Coley, Spiky by Red Snapper, Curzon by Dim Dyke Stare, Country Gentleman by Family Force 5-inch, Call Me the Breeze by Lynyrd Skynyrd, To Sir With Love by Lulu, A Little Bit of Soap by the Jarmels, If I Didn't Have a Dime by Ron Moody and the Centaurs. Marketing. Netflix officially announced El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, on August 24, 2019, unveiling the title, description, poster, logo, teaser trailer, and the October 11, 2019 release date for the film. Days prior, Netflix accidentally listed the film on its website, which users quickly noticed before it got pulled. Due to the secrecy of the project, fans and critics alike were taken aback by the sudden announcement, as well as by learning that the release date would come sooner than expected. Trailers. The first teaser released during El Camino's announcement featured a scene where the DEA interrogated Skinny Pete on Jesse Pinkman's whereabouts. Charles Baker reprised the role in the public's first glimpse of the film. Though the scene was not used in the final cut, some critics noted after the film's premiere of the trailer's significance in El Camino's chronology, speculating that it likely took place shortly after Jesse and Skinny Pete parted ways. Baker later revealed the original script did not include the teaser trailer's scene. Netflix released its first trailer on September 10, 2019, which solely consisted of Breaking Bad clips set to a cover of Enchanted by Chloe X. Halle. A second teaser, which featured Jesse sitting in the El Camino and listening to news reports of the prior events of the series on the radio, debuted during the 71st Primetime Emmy Awards ceremony on September 22, 2019. A full trailer premiered on September 24, 2019, which gave viewers their first full look of clips from El Camino, accompanied by the song Black Water by Reuben and the Dark. Before El Camino's premiere, Netflix released 2 more promotional videos that used new footage from the film or the set, a teaser clip of Old Joe speaking with Jesse on the phone, and a 2-minute behind-the-scenes featurette. Netflix later released an extended 13-minute behind-the-scenes featurette titled The Road to El Camino on October 29, 2019. The Countdown to El Camino. Before the release of El Camino, the Twitter accounts of Breaking Bad and Samsung US shared a countdown. Titled The Countdown to El Camino, the promotion resulted from Samsung's partnership with Netflix. The countdown would also be available as a 62-hour live stream on Samsung televisions prior to the film's release. The campaign saw the return of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul character Huel Babineau, with Lavelle Crawford reprising the role. Throughout the countdown, Huel appeared in several short video interludes of him sitting impatiently in a safe house, N10, loafing around or watching the news. Upon the countdown's conclusion, a video showed of Huel leaving the safe house. The character ultimately did not appear in El Camino, but many remarked that the promotion answered a question long posed by fans of Huel's fate after Breaking Bad ended. Over 3.5 million viewers watched the live stream before the film's release. Chemistry, the advertising agency behind the promotion, later submitted the campaign for award consideration under the name Waiting with Huel. The campaign earned bronze distinction in television for the 12th Annual Shorty Awards and the Bronze Award for Branded Entertainment and Content for the 2020 Clio Awards. Snow Globe, a Breaking Bad short. In conjunction with the television premiere of El Camino on AMC, the network released a 3-minute short film Snow Globe, a Breaking Bad short, on its official YouTube account on February 16, 2020. The short, directed by Eric Schmidt and written by Melissa Ng, stars Jesse Plemons as Todd, with Laura Fraser providing her voice as Lydia Rodarte Quayle. Taking place at some point before the events of the film, the short features Todd assembling a custom snow globe, which includes his and Lydia's likenesses and little floating stevia packets, as he tries to call her to ask her on a date. El Camino previously featured the same snow globe in the scene when Casey inspects Todd's bedroom. Release El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, had its world premiere on October 7, 2019, at the Regency Village Theater in Los Angeles, with multiple cast members from the film, Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul in attendance. Netflix digitally released the film on October 11, 2019. El Camino also received a limited theatrical release from October 11 to 13, 2019 in the United States. It later premiered on AMC television on February 16, 2020, following a complete marathon of the series on the network. On the day of El Camino's release, Robert Forster, who played Ed in both the series and film, died of complications from brain cancer at the age of 78. Among others throughout Hollywood, the cast and crew of Breaking Bad paid tribute to him. According to Aaron Paul, Forster watched the film before his passing. He was so proud of it and of me. He called to tell me that he loved me. I sensed something was wrong, but I got on a plane, and when I landed, he died. It was incredibly sad to hear. Audience viewership. Nielsen reported that El Camino drew 2.65 million viewers within a day of its release, with an overall 6.54 million total viewers during opening weekend. An additional reported 8.2 million viewers watched a few minutes of El Camino during its first 3 days of availability. This compared well to Breaking Bad's 5th season premiere, with 5.9 million viewers, and finale with 10.3 million when they first aired on AMC. After the first week of its release, Netflix announced that over 25 million households had seen the film. For El Camino's limited theatrical release, 12 of the 125 theaters that screened the film reported a combined gross of $40,000, an average of $3,333 per venue. The Wrap calculated that if El Camino received a proper wide theatrical release, and that if every reported viewer had purchased a ticket for the average price to see it, then the film would have topped the box office that weekend. Months later, El Camino drew 774,000 viewers for its AMC television premiere. Home media. El Camino received its first home video release on October 13, 2020, as a DVD Blu-ray combo packaged in a limited edition steelbook from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. Features exclusive to the Blu-ray consisted of a commentary track from Vince Gilligan and Aaron Paul, deleted and extended scenes, a gag reel, and scene studies with Gilligan. Other features on both the Blu-ray and DVD included a commentary track from multiple members of the cast and crew, a behind-the-scenes documentary, promotional teasers and trailers, and visual effects design galleries. Reception. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, has a score of 91% based on the opinions of 134 critics, with an average rating of 7.310. Its critical consensus read, "Entertaining if not essential, El Camino adds a satisfying belated coda to the Breaking Bad story, led by a career-best performance from Aaron Paul." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned El Camino a score of 72 out of 100 based on 34 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Judy Berman of Time lauded Aaron Paul's mesmerizing lead performance, citing his ease at fully re-inhabiting a role he hadn't played for years, endowing Jesse with the same mix of waning goofiness and escalating existential terror that propelled him through the finale. Liz Shannon Miller elaborated in her review from The Verge that Paul's work in El Camino is staggering, given the high difficulty factor that comes with having to play so many variations of this character, and followed this by stating, "What makes El Camino so compelling is the way it engages with how he's changed since those early days." In contrast, GQ's David Levesley felt El Camino did not utilize Paul's full potential, saying that without actors to bounce off, the film often doesn't know what to do with him. Daniel Feinberg of The Hollywood Reporter would also highlight Jesse Plemons' performance, mentioning, "Plemons never got the respect he deserved, and this might be a good time to properly relish what an odd and awful guy Todd was." Feinberg further commended Vince Gilligan's direction, calling Gilligan a precise and complicated visual stylist. "The conception of Breaking Bad as a modern Western has never been so clearly articulated and executed." He also credited cinematographer Marshall Adams, editor Skip McDonald, and composer Dave Porter, all of whom worked on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, for helping El Camino return to the original show's grammar. Writing for Entertainment Weekly, critic Darren Franick called Gilligan's style energetic and lauded the larger budget being applied more for high anxiety than flashy pyrotechnics, citing El Camino's cinematography, editing, and montages as examples. Eric Adams of the AV Club found the Western imagery a bit clumsily deployed, but complimented the scale of the film. As a Breaking Bad continuation, from a narrative perspective, Alan Sepinwall of Rolling Stone praised El Camino as a continuation of Breaking Bad, stating that if the conclusion had a flaw, it's that Jesse got left behind a bit. By the end of El Camino, that's no longer the case. The Daily Beast's Melissa Leon agreed, saying that Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan's meditative neo-Western El Camino attaches a coda to Jesse's story, detailing the emotional and physical scars Walt left him to live with. Regarding the film's chronology from the preceding series, Steve Green of IndieWire commented, "Though the specter of Jesse's former partners haunt El Camino, Gilligan effectively holds the audience's attention to keep them focused on the present." When comparing the film to other franchise continuation projects, Roxanne Sancto of Little White Lies mentioned that movie spin-offs have become a dangerous trend that often ends in disappointment. The balance needs to be just right, and fortunately, creator Vince Gilligan has nailed it with El Camino. While Josh Spiegel of Slash Film found El Camino enjoyable, he conversely saw the film as inessential to the overall arc of the series. He wrote that, "If you loved Breaking Bad, you might have wondered, what will happen to Jesse Pinkman next?" It's not even that Vince Gilligan answering that question was a bad idea. It's that a 2-hour version of that answer, as beautiful as it looks and as well acted as it is, was wholly superfluous. Franick similarly compared El Camino to a television reunion special, calling it a playful project, very fun, not always necessary. Less complimentary was the BBC's Hugh Montgomery, who described it as a franchise extension as lazy and vacuous as anything dreamt up on the big screen. However, Alyssa Wilkinson of Vox reasoned that the enjoyment of El Camino comes from seeing your favorite characters again, not finally resolving missing pieces that have tortured your sleep for 6 years. Brian Tallarico of RogerEbert.com also noted the necessity of having seen the entirety of Breaking Bad before watching the film, writing that, "If you're hazy on what happened in the AMC hit, be warned that El Camino does not hold your hand. It is not designed to exist as a standalone movie as much as something watched after the end of Season 5. Richard Roper of Chicago Sun-Times concurred, saying, "You'll be as lost as Badger without Skinny Pete if you tried to watch this sharp and compelling sequel without having seen the series." When speaking as to which audience would enjoy the film, Vadim Rizov of Sight and Sound remarked that El Camino will only work for fans who can recall who all these familiar faces are. The nostalgic pull and possibility for reconnection are sometimes recapped in dialogue, most of it avoiding the ludicrously expository, but outsiders will be baffled. Accolade. El Camino received several nominations in the streaming or television film categories from major industry award ceremonies, where Breaking Bad previously won multiple accolades in the television series categories. 3 awards won by the film included Best Movie Made for Television at the Critics' Choice Television Awards, Outstanding Achievement in Sound Editing, Single Presentation at the Golden Reel Awards, and Best Motion Picture Made for Television at the Satellite Awards. For the 72nd Primetime Creative Arts Emmy Awards, El Camino received 4 nominations: Outstanding Television Movie, Outstanding Single Camera Picture Editing, and Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Limited Series or Movie, and Outstanding Sound Editing for a Limited Series, Movie, or Special. Many critics predicted that Paul and Plemons would be respectively nominated for Outstanding Lead Actor and Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Limited Series or Movie for their roles in the film, but both actors were left off when the nominees were announced. As Breaking Bad collected a total of 16 Emmy Awards throughout its run, some critics also felt El Camino could potentially win Outstanding Television Movie based on the series' prior clout with voters. However, Bad Education went on to claim the award, while Watchmen won in every technical category where El Camino was nominated Future. Both Vince Gilligan and Aaron Paul regarded El Camino as the proper conclusion to Jesse Pinkman's story, with neither having immediate plans for a sequel after the film's release. Speculating on Jesse's new life in Haines, Alaska, following the events of El Camino, Gilligan surmised that Jesse would enjoy the brewery and maybe get a job with the ski manufacturer. The very nice people of Alaska would welcome him into the community. Paul believed that Jesse is going to keep his nose clean. He has quite a bit of cash on hand, and he's going to live a very modest lifestyle. He's moving to a very small place in Alaska, so he doesn't need all that much money. He knows how to work with his hands, and so he just needs to refresh those skills and become the artist that he was always meant to be. However, neither Gilligan nor Paul definitively ruled out the possibility of a sequel film to El Camino. Gilligan wanted to create a new story outside of the Breaking Bad franchise once he helped finish the final season of Better Call Saul, but indicated a slight chance of returning to Jesse's storyline if everyone still held interest. He suggested a possible sequel could take place in Haines. Paul said he would be interested in playing Jesse again if Gilligan felt he had more story to tell, but highly doubted such a scenario could occur since the film gave the character a satisfying ending. He also expressed a desire to work with Gilligan again, regardless if the project was related to Breaking Bad or not. Though Paul signaled warmth to the idea of seeing Jesse's adventures in Alaska, he also declined the prospect of a new Breaking Bad season that would focus on him. Paul would eventually reprise Jesse Pinkman again in Better Call Saul's final season for 2 episodes, with Gilligan directing the second. However, his character's appearances canonically took place before the events of El Camino. After the initial announcement of his guest-starring role, Paul reiterated that any other return as Jesse Pinkman required Gilligan's involvement. Gilligan reaffirmed he had no plans for any new entries in the Breaking Bad franchise shortly before Better Call Saul concluded. Following the series finale, Paul said he felt confident that Better Call Saul marked Jesse's final appearances and called it a farewell to his character. Jesse Pinkman grafted his way into the pop culture pantheon through a combination of innocence soon lost, idiocy largely maintained, and a politically incorrect tendency to append every sentence with the word bitch. Now in El Camino, the movie follow-up to hit anti-hero drama Breaking Bad, he gets a chance to wrap up his story. He's back, but the story's moved on, his catchphrase now notable by its absence. El Camino begins where Breaking Bad ended. Pinkman, Aaron Paul, has been liberated from the hellish prison in which he had been confined by neo-Nazis, forced to cook industrial-grade crystal meth. The man doing the liberating was Walter White, Pinkman's mentor turned nemesis and chemistry teacher turned drug kingpin. White is dead now, though, killed during the rescue mission. Pinkman, meanwhile, is speeding away in a muscle car, the 1978 Chevrolet El Camino, heading, creator Vince Gilligan previously claimed, to something better. Except, it turns out, he isn't. The first scene shows Pinkman putting his foot on the brake, lowering his gaze as the police pass by, en route to the crime scene. From there, he goes to the home of his friends Badger and Skinny Pete, where he eats noodles and falls asleep. After a brief reunion in which his friends go above and beyond to help him out, "Dude, you're my hero and shit," says Skinny Pete. He drives off again, but only to another block in Albuquerque, his hometown, and another moment of tension. The title of this Breaking Bad movie, then, is something of a misdirection. El Camino, Spanish for road or way, is not the story of a man skipping town. Rather, it's about someone who is trapped not just in New Mexico, but in his head, bound by the trauma he has just experienced and the memories that help him finally to work out where to go next. There has been much speculation among Breaking Bad enthusiasts, of which there are many, over which characters from the original show would return here. The answer is several, including big hitters, even though most of them are dead. El Camino cuts continuously between the 48 hours that follow Jesse's escape and a number of flashbacks, some from his time in captivity and some from earlier than that. Most of the cameos should come as a surprise, but it doesn't feel like spoiling things too much to note that there is a standout turn from Jesse Plemons as Todd, a childlike sociopath who plays good captor to Jesse during his time in the cage. The film follows an interesting structure, and one that contradicts the impression given by some of the pre-release marketing. Gilligan, who reprises his own role as writer and director, has always been good at keeping his audience on their toes. His penchant for bravura cinematography is on display once again, with one time-lapse sequence featuring 8 Jessies creeping around a house, proving a standout moment. But while it has both style and content, El Camino feels more like a feature-length TV episode than an actual movie. It is too compact and fragmented to truly stand on its own, and viewers who have not seen the preceding 62 hours of Breaking Bad will likely struggle to enjoy it. That El Camino is a Netflix production, set to be released on the streaming giant today with only a smattering of cinema screenings and none in the UK, might explain this construction. However, where it excels is in giving the character of Jesse some closure. Paul told The Guardian this week that Breaking Bad changed my life. It won him 3 Emmys for a start, and, like a meth kingpin who had successfully hidden his money in the desert, it likely set him up for life. But it's also true that Paul has since struggled to find a role that allowed him to put Pinkman behind him. It's the project he continues to be best known for, a privilege but also a tether. Here, he is allowed to move on and leave both the clowning criminal and the haunted victim of the series behind. El Camino shows Pinkman become an adult, someone dressed not in bright yellow hoodies, but cable-knit jumpers. He achieves this metamorphosis gradually through unlocking the various challenges that are laid in his path. Some of them are technical, like the great magnet-inspired conceits of the TV series, but others are emotional, even moral. The path of El Camino is not a literal one, and it's completed without a single bitch. Breaking Bad was always a show about consequences. More than arguably any other drama, decisions had repercussions, and slates weren't wiped clean between episodes. We followed the arc of Walter White, Bryan Cranston, and Jesse Pinkman, Aaron Paul, from that first day in the desert in the series premiere to the blood-soaked finale. and it was easy to trace the line of consequences that got us from the starting to the finish line. A structure in which the viewer can be confident that action leads to reaction is naturally going to enhance viewer interest, and that was the part of the draw of the show. How will what we're watching now impact what happens next? It also helped make it a perfect show for binging on Netflix. It's that fertile creative ground that brought Vince Gilligan back to this world in his Netflix original, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. A need to know another chapter in Jesse Pinkman's story. The result is a project that feels true to its source, a well-crafted epilogue for a beloved character who vividly understands the concept of consequences. If you're hazy on what happened in the AMC hit, be warned that El Camino does not hold your hand. It is not designed to exist as a standalone movie as much as something watched after the end of Season 5, although I do like that it didn't happen right away, giving its creator and star more time to enrich the project. What might have felt more like a cash grab were it made in the wake of the award-winning final season feels more creatively driven 6 years later. However, you need to remember what happened at the end of Season 5. Most importantly, that Walter rescued Jesse from the meth-dealing Nazis who had been holding him prisoner. We learn more about that captivity in El Camino, and running from trauma is a major theme of the film. Gilligan picks up right away chronologically. Walter and most of the Nazis, including Todd, Jesse Plemons, are dead. Jesse has fled the scene, screaming and speeding into the night. Naturally, the authorities are descending on the massacre, and they have a few questions for Mr. Pinkman, who has one goal: get out of New Mexico. El Camino actually opens with a flashback to a conversation with a familiar face that I won't spoil. There are a few in El Camino, although the big ones don't feel like fan service as much as grace notes for Jesse's arc, about Jesse wanting to get out of Albuquerque and escaping all the way to Alaska. For 122 minutes, that's the main drive of El Camino, getting Jesse to Alaska. He will have to evade the cops and some new enemies to make it there, but El Camino isn't exactly a thriller, despite a wonderful high noon showdown. It's more of a reclamation of a classic TV character, from screaming victim of fate who was manipulated by Walter White to someone who's ready to make his own decisions. Breaking Bad was always a deeply cinematic show. It was shot on film, and so the transition to a feature feels organic. What I mean is that El Camino is both cinematic and like the show, as Gilligan uses the bright lights of New Mexico and the dark shadows of the world that Jesse has to descend into once more well. If anything, the visual language of his show was often underrated, and absolutely none of that is lost here. Gilligan could easily transfer his skills with composition to the big screen, and this will play on a few of them in conjunction with its Netflix run. In terms of performance, El Camino is a vehicle, for Aaron Paul, an actor who hasn't really found a part since Jesse that can show off his skills. He's again great here, capturing the push and pull of trauma and need within Jesse. On the one side, he has been through something horrible, and we see glimpses of his time in captivity through flashback, including an extended one with Plemons Todd that directly informs the plot of the film, but he also knows that he does not have the luxury of time to grieve or heal. That can come when he makes it to Alaska. Fans of Breaking Bad will draw thematic parallels between the new movie and their favorite show. There's something fascinating to me about how Walter basically had no one at the end of the series, but El Camino opens with Jesse calling on a network of people to enable his escape, including allies like Skinny Pete, Charles Baker, Badger, Matt Jones, and even Old Joe, Larry Hankin. A key character in El Camino says, "From where I sit, you made your own luck, as did your former partner." There's something telling about where those two versions of luck took both characters. It's also interesting that BB was often about plans, almost as detailed as a procedural at times, and El Camino reflects that both in Jesse's escape and that key flashback with Todd, in which Jesse was forced to help the sociopath who killed his girlfriend Andrea. To me, that flashback is key to the thematic success of El Camino, and how it works in conjunction with Breaking Bad, in that it informs so much of Jesse's plans. One action leads to another, from the very beginning of the show through its epilogue. Now we're just left to wonder what happened to Skylar. Maybe we'll find out in 2025. Early in El Camino, Old Joe, Larry Hankin, a junkyard proprietor, visits Jesse Pinkman, Aaron Paul, to relieve him of the stolen pickup car that gives this sequel its title. This job's on the house, he tells Jesse for old time's sake. Magnets, he says, recalling a famous physics-based Season 5 escapade. Yeah, that was a good one. It's a striking line, as if Joe were a nostalgic fan of the very story that he's a character in. If remembering the heyday of one of TV's greatest series is enough for him, then he might be just the audience for El Camino, now on Netflix and in theaters. The film, written and directed by the series' creator, Vince Gilligan, is a well-crafted postscript that entertainingly extends the Breaking Bad cinematic universe by 2 hours without really adding to it. The Jesse we meet in El Camino is not the boisterous, yeah, bitch, magnets Jesse of memory, and with good reason. He's vacant-eyed and half-feral, just freed from enslavement to a white supremacist gang by his ex-partner, the drug lord Walter White, Bryan Cranston. Showing up on the doorstep of his old buddies Badger, Matt Jones, and Skinny Pete, Charles Baker, he's suddenly back in the land of liberty and Axe body spray, with hours to get his hands on enough cash to disappear before the law finds him. Paul's performance was often overshadowed by Cranston's during the series' run, but he's phenomenal here. For much of El Camino, he practically stars in a silent film, giving us Jesse as a hunted animal so scarred that even speaking is an effort. This makes an asset of the 40-year-old Paul's playing a character in his 20s. You can believe that Jesse's last year aged him a decade. When, in a flashback scene, his captor Todd, Jesse Plemons, talks him out of a gun and a shot at freedom, a tear leaks out of Paul's eye like the last liquefied remnant of Jesse's spirit. Breaking Bad, with its standoffs and lonely desert vistas, was always at least half Western. El Camino is even more so, literally climaxing in a Wild West quick-draw gunfight and fitting its heist scenes into an outlaw gets-out-of-Dodge story. El Camino means the road or the way in Spanish, and the title is as much about Jesse's path from A to B as it is about his temporary wheels. Scene for scene, the movie is a satisfying reminder of what Breaking Bad did so well, not simply because it manages curtain calls for Jonathan Banks as the grizzled enforcer Mike Ehrmantraut, Robert Forster as Ed, the vacuum cleaner salesman with a sideline in Disappearing Criminals, and Krysten Ritter as Jesse's departed junkie soulmate, Jane, a rare female presence in what is a very male story even by Breaking Bad standards. There's that familiar, arid humor, much of it coming during that lost weekend at Todd's apartment when he and Jesse removed the body of Todd's cleaning lady. I had not pegged him as the space-age bachelor pad type. There's the trademark use of cars as character, as Jesse tries to make it to the finish line in a borrowed rattletrap Pontiac Fiero. Gilligan walks Jesse through a gauntlet of frying pans and fires a series of break-ins and double crosses as tense and seamless as any Breaking Bad caper. But that's the thing. They're almost exactly what you'd expect from a Breaking Bad episode, except more drawn out. A series that popularized the idea of TV as cinematic, spectacular in visual scale, adept with surprising imagery and montage, has produced an actual film that plays like an extended TV episode. Stipulating that it's the lowest form of criticism to fault artists for telling the story they did, rather than the one you hoped for, I still have to ask, what did we need from El Camino? It ends with Jesse in Alaska, a place he talked about escaping to, and the place I'd have assumed he ended up had the movie never been made. It's a zippy and scenic ride, but we already had the map. This meth-filled RV trip took me to the greatest heights of television throughout its 5 seasons. For me, no show has ever had as great of a combination of writing, editing, and acting that Breaking Bad does. The product is perfect. All you can do is ruin it. Therefore, it's safe to say that when I heard El Camino was coming out, and it would attempt to complete Jesse's arc, I was hesitant with my excitement. Certainly, getting more Breaking Bad isn't a bad thing, but I had no complaints about the series ending. I enjoyed the fact that Jesse was rescued from captivity only to drive away in an El Camino, hence the title, with a crazed rage to an unknown fate. That ambiguity allowed for a more tragic ending to a character who was the least morally corrupt of them all. At the beginning of the series, Jesse Pinkman was just a low-level drug dealer, running away from the cops. In comparison to the rest of the drug world we see throughout the series, Jesse is merely innocent. He was a potentially redeemable character that ended up being brought down by Walter White's power-hungry ideals. Through this, Jesse gets kicked out of his house, kills 3 people, watches 2 of his girlfriends die in front of him, gets sent to the hospital by a DEA agent, and is held captive in a neo-Nazi compound where he's forced to cook meth for them. The spiral down is gnarly, and there are many times where Jesse even tries to quit only to be coerced by Walt to continue. So for Jesse to drive away from this hell, never to be seen again, with zero hope for redemption, made sense to me. I didn't want anything to ruin that. However, when I saw that Vince Gilligan, the creator of the show, wrote and directed this film, I was sold. To some degree, this had to be good, and I'm glad to say it really was. El Camino is the epilogue to Breaking Bad. I didn't think I needed, but I'm glad to have. El Camino takes place immediately after the events of the series finale and focuses on Jesse trying to get away from the cops and to safety. That's all I feel comfortable saying without spoiling anything. This film is filled with that same great storytelling, same great acting, and the same great vibe that Breaking Bad had, just a larger budget. However, Aaron Paul is the main reason this movie works. His performance as Jesse reminded me how great of an actor he can be when given the right material. He fits back into the role like a glove and doesn't skip a beat. My only issue with the movie is time. Not its length, but rather the number of years since Breaking Bad ended. People clearly look older, especially in quite a bit of flashback scenes, and it occasionally took me out of it. One character, who I won't mention because it's a possible spoiler, has, let's just say, grown a bit since we last saw them. Even then, El Camino's finale does justice for Jesse's character, in a way the show's ending didn't. However, it still allows for the themes of the series to continue forward in a natural way, where Breaking Bad's legacy is still intact. El Camino, which begins moments after the events depicted in the 2013 finale of Breaking Bad, is startling from nearly its first shot, as one reckons with the fact that Aaron Paul is now well older than Jesse Pinkman. As Pinkman, the young naif turned assistant meth cook turned slave, whose liberation from literal shackles provided one of the most resounding moments of triumph in that series' final installment, Paul is now harder looking, perhaps a bit thicker, warier than ever before. A small part of that is the work of the show itself. After being shaved and cleaned up, Jesse's face is revealed to be scarified by his captors in ways facial hair had hidden and memory may have elided. And a larger part is time. 6 years older than he was at show's end when he was playing someone just barely out of his teens, Paul at 40 holds the screen in a new way now. This serves the character, one who has every reason to have aged more than 6 years during his time in captivity. And it helps El Camino, a mixed-bag continuation that undermines Breaking Bad nearly as often as it provides succor for fans, make its most elegant and oblique points. After all, an older-seeming Jesse is the one that the events of Breaking Bad have produced. A character's throwback mention of one of Jesse's giddy outbursts from the show's run feels with a resolutely ungiddy Jesse in frame, like a story not just from a different era, but about a different person. So it is. This Jesse is shorn both of friskiness and of anything outside his tunnel vision understanding of what he needs to do to get free. This story follows Jesse as he works to break himself not only of any last associations to the underworld he'd too long dwelt in, but of what inner hauntings remain. El Camino is notionally named for the car he drives away from Breaking Bad's final conflagration, but its title's obvious double meaning, it translates to the way, generates the story's real juice. Jesse needs to deal with loose ends and also to find a path toward redemption. That journey is told with flair, if not always much wit or irony. Jesse has been through the darkest parts of Breaking Bad, and thus the show's occasional levity has no place in his narrative now. There's a momentum to his story. It has a heist movie-style checklist carried out by a team composed of only one, that has its own satisfactions and set pieces with real tension, even if they lead to a less than novel place. Robert Forster, as a man who helps people disappear, is a welcome returnee from the world of Breaking Bad, but his assistance being the final step of Jesse's quest feels surprising in its lack of surprise. Vince Gilligan, the show's creator and the film's director and writer, makes use of a presumably robust budget and of the fact that El Camino will be exhibited on some big screens with some genuinely gorgeous shot-making. Yet there's an obviousness, one that haunts the long-tail legacy of Breaking Bad, in the title. In flashbacks depicting various Breaking Bad characters, all dead in the movie's timeline, urging Jesse forward. In Jesse's action hero clarity of purpose, and in the resounding gruesomeness of the abuse he is shown to have suffered at the hands of his masters. To wit, Jesse Plemons' performance as Todd, the worst of Jesse's tormentors, was of career-making interest on Breaking Bad for the degree to which it seemed random, an evil born from nothing at all. Shown at far greater length in flashbacks interspersed throughout El Camino, Todd's assaults come off as that most toxic of things, desensitizing. Breaking Bad was not a show whose great strength was its subtlety, and yet the story it told moved on a gradient, depicting the growing monstrousness of meth maestro and Pinkman partner Walter White, Bryan Cranston, and Jesse's increasingly frantic confusion at how to handle living in the reality Walt created. El Camino happens after a terminus, and its emotional arc, such as it is infinitesimal, moving from extreme trauma and exhaustion to its slight amelioration through the completion of various tasks. A cut early in the film, from Jesse's escape by car to a first-person driving video game being played by his friends and last remaining allies, Matt Jones and Charles Baker, welcome presences as the only purposefully funny performers in the proceedings, is instructive. Driven by inner rage and by the requirements of a story stretching its limits, Jesse feels at times more avatar than person. Such bluntness and such prioritization of the story's scheme over the character are more and more a part of the Breaking Bad universe. After a finale in which Walt was, as if by magic, granted a conditionally happy ending, with security for his family, triumph over the more monolithically evil characters, and freedom for Jesse, Gilligan has continued embroidering on the story's edges. It's an outcome that has been welcomed by fans, even, or especially, as a finale that gives fans everything they want has indeed left them wanting. Elsewhere, spin-off series Better Call Saul began its life by asking genuinely provocative tangential questions about what it means to make moral slips far less seismic than making and dealing meth, and what sort of person chooses to avoid redemption. The show has waned in interest as it delves further into the Breaking Bad mythos. Little story about characters from that series remains to be told in a compelling and original way. So it is with El Camino, which presents a Jesse who's aged into a bitterness that's understandable, if not quite dimensional enough to support a movie without endless restatement of just how much he's suffered. Gilligan is shrewd enough amid so much pain to provide a dose of fan service. Walt and Jesse together again, and, better yet, in happier times, via a late-in-film flashback in which Walt advises Jesse that a remarkable future lies ahead of him. Jesse could go to college, or Walt says, practically teach a college course, so expert is he in business now. This being Walt, one of the most self-justifying characters in modern TV history, it would be ungenerous to read the exchange solely on its face. And yet there seems, based on its placement near the end of a gauntlet of trials that bring Jesse almost all the way to independence, a very hefty dollop of uplift intended here too. Jesse has transcended the hell Walt brought him to, and emerges from it bolstered by the fact that Walt believed in him, once long ago, and in a flattering way intended to soak Jesse for his talents and connections. For a second time, El Camino lets one of the TV protagonists most deserving of a real reckoning off the hook. But the film is merciless with Jesse, and to its benefit. His character emerges most clearly through the shrouds of anger and grief when he is placed in situations where the easy way out would be a killing. This is not to say he doesn't do harm in El Camino, but more often he seems to beg for an opportunity to set himself right without setting someone else wrong. It's a character choice that's suffused with a deep understanding of what came before, not just in the story, but within the soul of a man whom we remember, from years ago, as young in every particular. El Camino makes choices that limit its success and that don't serve the legacy of Breaking Bad. But its arrival at a place of wholeness after 2 hours of painful anxiety suggests that though the path Gilligan and company took was at times a dubious one, El Camino can't finally be said to have lost its way. But let me just say it's very satisfying, as is the suspense in this film. They do throw some character vignettes in, and those could threaten to disrupt the flow of the movie, but luckily there's usually a point to everything, and they don't take forever, even when scenes seem disjointed. And you think you're taking a ride through Pinkman's broken mind, you realize that everything has a purpose. The scenes in Todd's apartment with the cops and the sequence in the junkyard closer to the end of the film are especially tense and really paced well. Surprisingly, the cinematography was also beautiful. There are some nice long shots of New Mexico, especially the mountain areas that show how stunning the landscape in the desert can be. This is nicely juxtaposed with the seedy rundown. Parts of Albuquerque, which fans of the show will recognize in general, it's hard to shake the feeling that this movie is made for television. It didn't premiere theatrically, and it was linked to a popular television show. If people want to look at it as such. So be it, there's no harm in that. And really, the production values are top-notch, as are the performances for that reason alone. You should check out this flick, if only to see Aaron Paul killing it again as Jesse Pinkman. El Camino starts, right from the end of Breaking Bad, but uses plentiful new flashbacks to lace its nonlinear narrative, coloring in the dangerous landscape and developing its lead character of Jesse, arguably better than ever before, affording us more from his torture past, which better informs his desperate plight in the present, haunted by demons desperately on the run. From gangs and authorities alike, we find Jesse has plenty of unfinished business. As he tries his utmost to get out of Dodge, scripting is excellent, affording some tense set pieces involving the cops and criminals or both, with Jesse battle-hardened by the literal torture he's been through, but still eminently human. In terms of his vulnerability, whilst finding innovative ways to bring back all of those beloved characters fans would have assumed were long since lost, and Paul, who has had some terrible roles and delivered commonly terrible performances, slips back into the familiar shoes while wearing the baggage. Of everything that happened to his character on his scar-ridden, pained face, Robert Forster also deserves a big nod. For absolutely nailing his vacuum repair shop owner, to mention the others, however, might spoil some nice surprises along this beautiful, horrible journey with a 4K Dolby Vision presentation and Dolby Atmos. El Camino looks considerably better than the series ever did, and very cinematic in style, with some stunning shots and wonderful exploration of the shadows, whilst flames and an explosion are eye-searingly good, far from too dark. Unlike plenty of Netflix fare, this one has been graded just right in terms of DV application, and it makes all the difference whether or not you're all that familiar with Breaking Bad. Obvious lie, it would help if you'd followed everything up until this point. This is a great little sequel story, peppered with the trademark black humor, but also firmly entrenched in the seemingly bleak and oftentimes bloody landscape that the show pervaded all the way through to its violent conclusion. Many would say that Breaking Bad ended perfectly, but this great addendum makes that ending just that little bit more perfect extra information. El Camino Vince Gilligan's follow-up to his remarkable TV series Breaking Bad arrive on Netflix this Friday, while it was easy to get excited at the promise of seeing some of Gilligan's wonderful characters again. El Camino came with at least a hint of trepidation as well. Unlike seemingly every TV show in recent memory, Breaking Bad had an immensely satisfying day, Numa perfectly ending the story by foregoing Hollywood's newfound insistence on subverting expectations and bringing the plot to its logical conclusion. Gilligan wisely reestablished the conditions under which Walter White's journey began and allowed him one last shot at doing it right, albeit with a healthy dose of criminality. Why add to that and risk spoiling the rare high note on which your series finale left its audience? El Camino needed a good answer to that, and unfortunately it doesn't provide one. Instead, we're left with a decent movie that shouldn't exist following the events of Felina Breaking Bad's final episode. El Camino follows Jesse Pinkman, newly released from his meth-making slavery and driving off to points unknown. Unfortunately, the law is after him, so Jesse has to evade a manhunt if he wants to escape the nightmare his life has become for good. Breaking Bad left Jesse in exactly the right position, no longer beholden to Walt, no longer a captive of white supremacists or in the crosshairs of drug dealers. He is completely free. He can go wherever he wants and create for himself any life he chooses, just as the finale was Walt's. Second chance Jesse was awarded a final gift from the man who dragged him into hell, not knowing, is part of what makes it work. Jesse likely didn't know where he'd go next, just like we didn't. So merely by existing, El Camino has a strike against it. We're now getting more information than we needed, blanks filled in with answers that will never be as satisfying as the questions, instead of Jesse's final impression being riding through the night with the wind in his hair, the classic American image of unbridled freedom. We're force-fed, and here's what happened next. But, all right, the trigger's been pulled and El Camino is out there. If it must be, then it had better have a compelling story to tell, something that will make us glad we're spending time with Jess Pinkman again, if only in the moment it doesn't. El Camino isn't a fascinating journey that takes Jesse to unforeseen places and reveals new aspects of his personality. It's just what we thought it would be as soon as it was announced. Jesse's got to make it out of the country before he's arrested. There are some wrinkles added along the way, and of course some dangerous elements are thrown into to cause trouble. But it's mostly nothing surprising. Moreover, there's very little tension throughout the film, we're told. Every law enforcement officer in the Southwest is pursuing Jesse, but there aren't many instances where he feels like he could be caught at any moment, aside from a few compelling scenes where he's in real danger. Jesse just drifts through El Camino, reflecting on his predicament with no urgency or emotion. His quiet introspection is a result of his maturing throughout Breaking Bad and the jumpstart that took during his imprisonment. But this newer, more thoughtful Jesse isn't as fun or interesting as his impetuous and, frankly, fairly dopey predecessor. Jesse wasn't meant to carry a story on his own, and El Camino proves it, also dragging down the narrative are the interminable flashbacks. It feels like half of El Camino takes place in the past, with the story proper existing in little enough time to have been an extra episode. Some of these are good. The opening scene is an excellent lost moment between Jesse and another character that sets up a much more interesting version of El Camino than what Gilligan made, but the bulk of the flashbacks are set during Jesse's captivity, and they feel like an excuse to bring back fan-favorite Todd on paper. The Todd flashbacks serve a purpose. They inform some of Jesse's actions in the present, providing us with some crucial information to understand where he's going and why, but they go on way longer than is necessary and eat up time that could be spent following the actual plot. We know that neither Todd nor Jesse can die in the flashbacks, which both removes any potential suspense and deprives us of seeing Jesse pay Todd back for his evil, knowing it happened in the past, is a poor substitute. Another reason why Breaking Bad should have been left alone. El Camino's narrative is sluggish, largely because the flashbacks won't let it move forward. El Camino isn't a bad movie. It's beautifully filmed with some expert cinematography, particularly in the tenser scenes, the way Jesse is framed. When having to avoid danger elicits some good ankle twists from the viewer, making the suspense work quite well. When it occurs, there are some gorgeous shots of the landscapes Jesse visits as well, from the New Mexico desert to snow-lined Woodland, the acting is phenomenal as well. This may not be as fun a Jesse as we're used to seeing, but Aaron Paul is always convincing, making the calmer and wiser Jesse feel authentic as he journeys through the aftermath of his ordeal. And while the movie needed much less of him for its own sake, Jesse Pulls once again alternates between unnerving and hilarious, sometimes not even alternating as the friendly but maniacal Todd, still appearing to live in his own little world of manners, good humor, and the occasional vicious murder. Matt Jones and Charles Baker are as funny as they were on the show as Jesse's Dimmel buddies Badger and Skinny Pete Bakers. Pete has one of the best lines in the movie, a sweet tribute to the friend he'll never forget. I don't want to spoil. Too many of the familiar faces, but none of the actors have missed a step. Newcomers Scott MacArthur and Scott Shepard are well cast as a couple of obstacles in Jesse's way. MacArthur, who's been creepily amusing on the righteous Gemstones as well, makes for an especially effective threat for all its faults. El Camino feels like it fits in the Breaking Bad universe. El Camino is fine. It isn't terrible, and it's very well filmed and acted, but it's not what it needed to be to justify extending the story of one of the best TV shows of all time, and one that was wrapped up perfectly well to begin with. It's worth checking out once, but as soon as the credits roll, you'll want to forget it ever happened. El Camino, which begins moments after the events depicted in the 2013 finale of Breaking Bad, is startling from nearly its first shot, as one reckons with the fact that Aaron Paul is now well older than Jesse Pinkman, as Pinkman, the young naif turned assistant, meth cook turned slave whose liberation from literal shackles provided one of the most resounding moments of triumph. In that series' final installment, Paul is now harder looking, perhaps a bit thicker, warier than ever before. A small part of that is the work of the show itself after being shaved and cleaned up. Jesse's face is revealed to be scarified by his captors in ways facial hair had hidden and memory may have all lighted. And a larger part is time 6 years older than he was at show's end when he was playing someone just barely out of his teens. Paul at 40 holds the screen in a new way. Now this serves the character, one who has every reason to have aged more than 6 years during his time in captivity, and it helps El Camino, a mixed bag continuation that undermines Breaking Bad nearly as often as it provides succor for fans, make its most elegant and oblique points. After all, an older-seeming Jesse is the one that the events of Breaking Bad have produced a character's throwback mention of one of Jesse's giddy outbursts from the show's run, feels with a resolutely itty Jesse in frame, like a story not just from a different era, but about a different person. So it is this Jesse is sure, both of friskiness and of anything outside his tunnel vision, understanding of what he needs to do to get free. This story follows Jesse as he works to break himself not only of any last associations to the underworld he too long dwelt in, but of what inner hauntings remain. El Camino is notionally named for the car he drives away from Breaking Bad's final configuration, but its title's obvious double meaning. It translates to the way generates the story's real juice. Jesse needs to deal with loose ends and also to find a path toward redemption. That journey is told with flair, if not always much wit or irony. Jesse has been through the darkest parts of Breaking Bad, and thus the show's occasional levity has no place in his narrative. Now there's a momentum to his story. It has a heist movie-style checklist carried out by a team composed of only one that has its own satisfactions and set pieces with real tension, even if they lead to a less than novel place. Robert Forster, as a man who helps people disappear, is a welcome returnee from the world of Breaking Bad, but his assistance being the final step of Jesse's quest feels surprising in its lack of surprise. Vince Gilligan, the show's creator and the film's director and writer, makes use of a presumably robust budget and of the fact that El Camino will be exhibited on some big screens with some genuinely gorgeous shop making, yet there's an obviousness one that haunts the long-tail legacy of Breaking Bad in the title and flashbacks depicting various Breaking Bad characters all dead in the movie's timeline, urging Jesse forward in Jesse's action hero, clarity of purpose, and in the resounding gruesomeness of the abuse he is shown to have suffered at the hands of his masters to ITT Jesse Pul's performance as Todd, the worst of Jesse's tormentors, was of career-making interest on Breaking Bad for the degree to which it seemed random and evil born from nothing at all, shown at far greater length in flashbacks interspersed. Throughout El Camino, Todd's assaults come off as that most toxic of things. Desensitizing Breaking Bad was not a show whose great strength was its subtlety, and yet the story it told moved on a gradient depicting the growing monstrousness of meth. Maestro and Pinkman partner Walter White, Brian. Cranston and Jesse's increasingly frantic confusion at how to handle living in the reality Walt created, El Camino, happens after a terminus, and its emotional arc, such as it is infinitesimal, moving from extreme trauma and exhaustion to its slight amelioration through the completion of various tasks cut early in the film, from Jesse's escape by car to a first-person driving video game being played by his friends and last remaining allies, Matt Jones and Charles Baker. Welcome presences as the only purposefully funny performers in the proceedings is instructive, driven by inner rage and by the requirements of a story stretching its limits. Jesse feels at times more avatar than person, such blunt and such prioritization of the story's scheme over the character are more and more a part of the Breaking Bad universe after a finale in which Walt was as if by magic granted a conditionally happy ending with security. For his family triumph over the more monolithically evil characters, and freedom for Jesse Gilligan has continued. Embroidering on the story's edges, it's an outcome that has been welcomed by fans, even or especially as a finale that gives fans everything they want, has indeed left them wanting elsewhere. Spin-off series Better Call SA began its life by asking genuinely provocative tangential questions about what it means to make moral slips far less seismic than making and dealing meth, and what sort of person chooses to avoid redemption. The show has waned in interest as it delves further into the Breaking Bad mythos. Little story about characters from that series remains to be told in a compelling and original way, so it is with El Camino, which presents a Jesse who's aged into a bitterness that's understandable, if not quite dimensional enough to support a movie. Without endless restatement of just how much he suffered, Gilligan is shrewd enough amid so much pain to provide a dose of fan service, Walt and Jesse together again, and better yet, in happier times via a late-in-film flashback in which Walt advises Jesse that a remarkable future lies ahead of him. Jesse could go to college, or, Walt says, practically teach a college course. So expert is he in business. Now, this being Walt, one of the most self-justifying characters in modern TV history. It would be ungenerous to read the exchange solely on its face, and yet there seems, based on its placement near the end of a gauntlet of trials that bring Jesse almost all the way to independence, a very hefty dollop of uplift intended. Here, too, Jesse has transcended the hell Walt brought him to and emerges from it, bolstered by the fact that Walt believed in him once long ago and in a flattering way intended to soak Jesse for his talents and connections for a second time. El Camino lets one of the TV protagonists most deserving of a real reckoning off the hook, but the film is merciless with Jesse, and to its benefit his character emerges most clearly through the shrouds of anger and grief when he is placed in situations where the easy way out would be a killing. This is not to say he doesn't do harm in El Camino, but more often he seems to beg for an opportunity to set himself right without setting someone else wrong. It's a character choice that's suffused with a deep understanding of what came before, not just in the story, but within the soul of a man whom we remember from years ago as young in every particular. El Camino makes choices that limit its success and that don't serve the legacy of Breaking Bad, but its arrival at a place of wholeness after 2 hours of painful anxiety suggests that though the path Gilligan and company took was at times a dubious one, Elino can't finally be said to have lost its way. This film, directed by Vince Gilligan, written by Vince Gilligan, produced by Mark Johnson, Melissa Bernstein, Charles Newirth, Vince Gilligan, Aaron Paul, Diane Mercer, starring Aaron Paul, Jesse Plemons, Krysten, Ritter, Charles Baker, M. Jones, Robert Forster, Jonathan Banks, Brian Cranston. Cinematography, Marshall Adams, edited by Skip McDonald, music by Dave Porter. Production companies, Sony Pictures Television, Gran via Productions. Highbridge Productions, distributed by Netflix, Sony Pictures release. Date October 11th, 2019, running time 122 minutes, country United States language, English, budget greater than $6 million, box office greater than $40,000. So guys, this is the review of El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.